At 0530 hours on December 21, 1944, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe stood in the frozen basement command post in Bastogne, Belgium, watching German Panzer tanks position themselves for an assault that would decide whether his surrounded forces would survive the next 48 hours. The dim lamplight flickered against the stone walls as he listened to distant engines rumbling through the snow-covered fields. He commanded all Allied forces inside the town, a patchwork of the 101st Airborne Division, Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division, tank destroyer battalions, artillery units, engineers, and scattering groups of stragglers fleeing shattered lines. Nearly 18,000 men, cold, hungry, and outnumbered by 3 converging German divisions. McAuliffe, 46 years old, a West Point artilleryman from Washington, D.C., had not even been the division commander 2 days earlier. The actual commander, Major General Maxwell Taylor, was in Washington attending meetings. Command fell to McAuliffe by chance. Now the Germans had completely surrounded the town, cutting every highway, every farm road, every track through the woods. They outnumbered the Americans 5-1. Ammunition was dwindling. Winter clothing was almost non-existent. Temperatures hovered at -15 degrees. And the nearest Allied reinforcements were 60 kilometers away, fighting tooth and nail to break through. What the Germans didn't understand was that, in surrounding Bastogne, what they thought was the perfect trap, they had made the worst tactical mistake of their entire offensive. They were about to concentrate their armor into a killing ground they could not escape. 2 days earlier, on December 19th, McAuliffe had explained to his regimental commanders why getting surrounded might actually destroy the German advance. The events that unfolded over the next 8 days would prove him right and would turn what seemed like an American disaster into one of the most decisive victories of the war. The 1st American Division crushed by the German onslaught had been the 106th Infantry on December 17th. Reports of their collapse reached McAuliffe as he moved north from France. The 106th was green, newly arrived, spread thin across the Schnee-Eifel Ridge on the German border. At 0530 on December 16th, German guns opened fire with 90 minutes of bombardment from over 1,500 artillery pieces. Then came the tanks. 3 German armies, 24 divisions, more than 400,000 men smashed through a front held by 4 exhausted American divisions. The 106th was swallowed whole. 8,000 men surrendered in the largest mass surrender of U.S. forces in Europe. Those were soldiers McAuliffe knew personally. He'd served with some. He trusted their professionalism. Their radio calls had become desperate during the final hours. They pleaded for ammunition, air support, reinforcements, anything. Then the radios went silent forever. The official reports said the 106th fought bravely and delayed the German timetable, but McAuliffe understood the deeper truth. They had been defending a long line, spread out, unable to concentrate, and had been crushed piece by piece. He feared the same fate was about to hit the 28th Infantry Division at Clairvaux. On December 17th, that division was hit by the 2nd Panzer Division, 120 tanks and 16,000 men. They fought for 2 days, losing 700 men before the town fell. The road to Bastogne lay wide open. By the time McAuliffe reached Camp Mormillon to prepare the 101st Airborne, he'd watched 2 divisions get ripped apart in 2 days. Every principle of war warned against getting surrounded. You maintained mobility, kept supplies flowing, refused entrapment. But at 3 a.m. on December 18th, the 101st loaded onto trucks with orders to hold Bastogne at all costs, whether they were equipped for winter or not. When McAuliffe reached Bastogne at 0900 on December 19th, he met Major General Troy Middleton of 8th Corps, who was evacuating his headquarters in a rush. Documents burned in trash cans. Radios were being dismantled. German tanks were less than 10 kilometers away. Middleton told McAuliffe 3 or 4 German divisions were converging on the town. American lines were collapsing. Even the roads the 101st had just used were now in danger. Middleton had already thrown the remnants of the 10th Armored Division into blocking actions. Team Desobry went north to Noville. Team Cherry went east to Longueville. Team O'Hara went southeast. Each force was tiny, maybe 400 men with a handful of tanks. But they fought like desperate men. At Noville, Team Desobry and the 501st Parachute Infantry held off the entire 2nd Panzer Division for 36 hours, destroying over 30 German tanks in close-range fog-shrouded engagements. Longueville and Ardennes saw similar delaying actions. Cherry's team was surrounded and nearly wiped out, but not before inflicting heavy losses. Those precious hours allowed the 101st Airborne to dig in around Bastogne. When McAuliffe asked Middleton how long he was expected to hold, Middleton said maybe 3 days, maybe a week, maybe until they were all dead. Then he gave the line McAuliffe never forgot: "Don't worry about getting surrounded. If they surround you, you'll have them right where you want them." McAuliffe dismissed it as bravado, but hours later, after studying the terrain, he realized Middleton was right. Bastogne wasn't a trap. It was the choke point of the entire Ardennes road network. Every major road crossed through this one small town. And the Germans needed those roads far more than the Americans did. On December 19th at 1400, McAuliffe gathered all his key commanders in a cramped, dimly lit basement. He spread a map across the table. Bastogne sat at the center like a hub with 7 spokes. "They need these roads more than we do," he began. The Germans had 4 days to reach the Meuse River, 4 days to cover 80 kilometers through forests and snow. They could not push armor cross-country. They needed highways. And the highways all ran straight through the town where the 101st now stood. If the Germans bypassed Bastogne, their supply lines would be exposed. If they surrounded it, they'd be forced to leave enormous numbers of troops behind to contain the garrison. "Every tank they put around us," McAuliffe explained, "is a tank that's not reaching the Meuse. Every battery of artillery they fire at us is artillery they can't fire at our reinforcements." And since the Germans were mechanized, they would have to attack along predictable avenues of approach, the roads. The Americans would set pre-sighted artillery, anti-tank guns, and minefields. The Germans would be forced to attack into prepared defenses again and again, losing irreplaceable armor. Lieutenant Colonel Ewell asked what would happen if reinforcements never arrived. "Then we all die," McAuliffe answered, "but the Germans won't reach the Meuse either." By noon on December 20th, the Germans had sealed the ring. 7 highways cut. Bastogne isolated. The American perimeter stretched 26 kilometers, relying on villages and ridgelines as anchor points. The 501st held the east. The 506th held the northeast near Foy. The 502nd guarded the northwest. The 327th Glider Infantry held the long southern arc. At the center sat the artillery, 3 battalions of 155 mm howitzers, under Colonel Tom Sherburne. Their guns were pre-registered on every approach. When the first German probe came at 1500, a company-sized force walking straight up a snowy road toward the 327th, the Americans held fire until 200 meters, then erupted with machine guns, rifles, and mortars. The German attack collapsed in minutes. The next assault came at dusk, with infantry supported by 6 Mark V Panthers. The Hellcat tank destroyers opened fire from hidden positions. 3 Panthers burned in 90 seconds. The attack fell apart. 5 Americans were wounded. 80 Germans lay dead. McAuliffe now understood Middleton's logic. The Germans were bleeding themselves. Their failures gave them no intelligence. And the Americans held positions they had prepared deliberately. But food was dwindling. Ammunition rationed. By December 21st, artillery was limited to 10 rounds per gun per day. Machine guns fired only single bursts. Soldiers wore every scrap of clothing they could find. Medical supplies were nearly gone because the main medical company had been captured days earlier, leaving surgeons improvising with torn blankets and makeshift tourniquets. Men who might have lived died instead. On December 22nd at 1100, 4 German officers approached with a white flag. They delivered a demand for surrender from General von Luttwitz. They offered honorable terms. They gave 2 hours for a reply. McAuliffe read the message, blinked once, and said, "Nuts." His staff was stunned. But that was the reply. When the Germans asked what it meant, Colonel Harper explained simply, "It means go to hell." The Germans were furious. And now they were committed. They pulled the 2nd Panzer Division back from the main advance, dragged Panzer Lehr eastward, reinforced the 26th Volksgrenadiers, and massed everything around Bastogne. Exactly as McAuliffe predicted. Then the weather changed everything. December 23rd dawned clear and blue. McAuliffe stepped outside and heard engines, dozens of them. C-47s appeared overhead, dropping parachute bundles that drifted over the town like colored confetti. Ammunition, food, plasma, medical kits, bandages, morphine. 241 aircraft delivered 144 tons of supplies. Then came the P-47 Thunderbolts, swooping low, bombing German assembly areas, strafing tanks, turning the snow-covered fields into burning wreckage. German armor was trapped on narrow forest roads, unable to maneuver under the constant aerial assault. On Christmas morning, at 0330, the Germans made one last desperate attempt to break the perimeter. 2 regiments supported by tanks smashed into the western line near Champs and Hemrul. They achieved a breakthrough and pushed into the village. McAuliffe raced to the operations center, directing reserves, calling artillery, shifting tank destroyers. The German attack became a trap. Tanks advancing without infantry were exposed. American anti-tank guns flanking them. Artillery shattered the supporting infantry. By noon, the Germans were retreating. 18 tanks destroyed. 1,500 casualties. The last chance to take Bastogne had evaporated. On December 26 at 1650, Lieutenant Charles Boggess of the 37th Tank Battalion drove the lead tank of the 4th Armored Division through the German lines south of Bastogne. American engineers rushed forward to greet them. The siege was lifted. Supplies flowed. Wounded evacuated. But by then, the German offensive had already failed. They had wasted their final armored reserves trying to crush a single stubborn town that refused to surrender. Their timetable shattered. Their fuel gone. Their momentum lost. Bastogne had bled the German advance dry. And for McAuliffe, who stood in the snow watching those first relief tanks rumble in, the lesson was clear. What the Germans thought was a trap had become their undoing. Bastogne had not just survived, it had broken the back of Hitler's last gamble in the West.